Just recently, I gained approval for the Katie Beckett deeming waiver for two of my sons. But this whole process was one of the most confusing and overwhelming things that I've had to do so far for my kids. I'm going to walk you through the exact process and timeline from the first forms all the way to the denials and appeals to the wins. So stay tuned.
Raising neurodivergent kids is messy, beautiful, and a lot. I'm Mary Ellen Yates, and this is Growing Together, Neurodiversity at Home. Let's figure it out together.
Okay, so let's get started. So during winter break last year, I was going over our taxes and all those things, and I was thinking there must be another way. We are spending a fortune in medical care, even with insurance for our kids. So I'm on a lot of special needs forums, and I saw that a lot of people apply for Social Security income. So I was like, okay, let's do that. So during break, when I had more time, I filled out all that paperwork online. And then towards the end of January, after a long telephone interview, they said that we didn't meet the criteria. So that was how the whole process started. So then I was like, okay, well, we don't meet the criteria. What do we qualify for? Then I contacted the Medicaid office. I applied for Medicaid and I went through that interview. They pretty much said the same thing. They're like, you make too much. But I'm like, what are people doing? Because I understand that my husband makes too much, but I am spending almost all my time homeschooling and bringing my kids to appointments that I don't have time to bring in an income. And there has to be something. And so finally, someone told me about Katie Beckett, and I had kind of heard about it a little before. And with the Katie Beckett deeming waiver, they look at the kid's income and not the parent's income. So then I started that whole process. Pretty much by the end of January, early February, I started looking into that. So the Medicaid office said, well, even though it's Medicaid, we don't deal with it. You have to specifically talk with the Katie Beckett office. So for over a week straight, I called the Katie Beckett office every day, and I would get an answering machine that said, don't call more than once in 24 hours. So about every 24 hours, I would call, couldn't get a hold of anyone. And in that time period, while I couldn't get a hold of someone, I had gone on the Georgia Medicaid website to the Katie Beckett section, and I had downloaded all of their paperwork and I started filling that out. And granted, I had already filled out SSI paperwork and I had already filled out the regular Medicaid paperwork. And so I was filling out that paperwork again. But then I was seeing in these online forums for Georgia that there was more paperwork than what was just on the website. And so I was like, well, I can't get a hold of them. I don't know what to do. And then I saw some people suggest Debbie Dobbs' website. She does advocacy work and she helps with the paperwork. So I looked on her website and I found her paperwork and her webinar on how to fill out the paperwork. So I did that course and I downloaded all the paperwork and I started filling it out how she was describing to fill it out. But I still felt like, what if something has changed? I really want to talk to the Medicaid office. So eventually I went back on the Katie Beckett website and I noticed at the bottom of the website, they have a form for contacting them. So I contacted them and saying, I cannot get a hold of your office. I keep calling, no one's returning my call. And I don't know if someone just finally returned my call or if it was me filling out the form online. But that next day, I finally got to talk to someone from that office. And she was very helpful. And she sent me the paperwork, which was very similar to the Debbie Dobbs paperwork, but it was not the same. Some of the forms had been updated. So then I spent even more time filling out that paperwork. So I filled out the paperwork 3 times before I finally got the Katie Beckett packet paperwork. So my suggestion first is definitely get a hold of the Katie Beckett office and get their packet of paperwork, because that is what is going to matter. Because I knew I was going to send this stuff in and they were going to give me a denial because I would have had something that wasn't complete because I didn't have what they required. But also on the webinar that I saw, it said to send in all of your medical records for the last year. So I had started collecting all the medical records from all the different people we had been to. And then when I got the checklist from the Medicaid office, they did not require that. They only required 12 months of hospital discharge paperwork, which we didn't have any, and 90 days worth of therapy notes, which was way, way easier than all the stuff that I was trying to collect and the money I was paying for to try to get medical records and all that. So what they were actually requiring for me, at least at this time when I was doing this in February, March timeframe, I just needed to get the therapy notes. So to keep that in mind, because you could just be wasting your time and money. So with that being said, I would definitely check out that Debbie Dobbs website because I do think it is helpful. And I'm going to be posting videos, the whole process too, and hopefully my videos can help as well from what my personal experience was right now. Anyways, the person I talked to from the Katie Beckett office told me that I could send copies of documentation that required any proof, like birth certificates. In addition to the Katie Beckett packet, she also sent me a checklist that had the things that I needed to include in the packet with what I was going to be sending back to them. So my kids had already gotten psychological eval, so I didn't need to get that. So at that point, once I got the packet, the thing that took the longest was making an appointment with my primary care provider and then getting the paperwork back after I had met with him. But if you have not gotten a psychological eval, that will likely take the most time to get that done. Don't even do anything else until the psychological eval is done and then go through the process of filling out the paperwork and getting an appointment with the physician. The physician should ideally be one of your last things that you get because they have a 90-day kind of time limit. And so you want the packet that you're giving them to have the physician's date within that 90-day window. So you want that date to be as fresh as possible from when you send in the packet. My primary care provider was very helpful and he was very willing to help out, but that office had not really dealt with this paperwork before, so they weren't really familiar with what to do. And then also I had a $70 charge per child to fill out the paperwork. So I had 2 children, so that was $140 that I had to pay to get the paperwork signed. Plus it was mostly me handing them what needed and then also telling them what they forgot and still needed to add. So the responsibility was mostly on me to make sure that they completed it and there was a charge. But I feel like this is probably going to be the case with most care providers you have, unless they're a provider that does this all the time and they're really comfortable with filling out the paperwork and the process. So after I had filled out all the paperwork and gotten everything squared away with my primary care provider, I mailed out the application on March 4th for both of my kids. I sent it priority mail and it was due to be at the Katie Beckett office on March 6th. And so then I waited. I did not hear anything until March 5th when someone from the Katie Beckett office contacted me. So they have 2 processes within the Katie Beckett application. The first process is someone that looks at all the demographics and looks at the child's income and just all of the regular Medicaid paperwork and all the other things that they require to make sure that we're even eligible from the start. Then they send it to the medical reviewers, which are medical professionals that review the medical information. But from the start, you have to get past the first step, which is just all the demographical information. So those people called me on May 5th and they basically asked me for verification of my husband's income and that there was no other income, and made sure that there was no other income for my kids. I did not disclose any income because my kids don't get child support. They don't have any bank accounts. They don't have any assets in their name, which is what they're looking for. Unlike every other type of Medicaid where they're looking at your income, with Katie Beckett, they're looking at the child's income. They also verified all of our social security numbers. And I think that was about it. And then they said that they were going to be sending the packet to the medical office. So that was pretty much exactly 2 months after I had sent the packet in. Then on May 20th, so that's only 15 days after I talked to the first people, I got my first denial letter. It was for my 11-year-old son, and it was for a level of care denial. There are 2 types of denial you can get. You can get a level of care denial and you can get a technical denial. He had a level of care denial. With a level of care denial, they're saying he doesn't qualify, and if you disagree, basically you need to request a hearing and then and then if you make it to the hearing, you go before a judge and you plead your case. From the date that is on the letter, you have 30 days to respond. So you can either accept the denial or you can ask for a hearing. And so the first thing I immediately did is I contacted 2 lawyers. Why 2? Because I figured lawyers are very busy. They might not have time, and I only have 30 days to deal with this. So I need to speak to someone as soon as possible, and my chances were better if I spoke to at least 2 people. And after advice from those lawyers, I sent in my hearing request on May 30th. And after filing a couple continuations later, I received electronic notification on July 31st saying that my oldest son had been approved for the Katie Beckett deeming waiver. And I think I received his card around August 5th. It really didn't take very long before I got his card. So that was my first son. So rewind back a little bit. And not too long after I had received the level of care denial for my first son, on May 19th, I received a technical denial letter for my second son. It requested a longer period of therapy notes. And so I requested more therapy notes from my kids' providers, and I sent those notes on May 29th, about 2 weeks after I had sent the additional documentation. But I did not receive his card. So finally, on July 8th, I contacted the Katie Beckett office and was put in touch with the case manager that was handling my son's case. And she said that there was a glitch in the system, and she had put in some requests with some supervisors to fix the glitch so that they could activate my son's card number and then get the card. So we were waiting on that glitch to be fixed, and it soon was. And finally, on July 18th, I received his. When you're going through the Katie Beckett process, you're given a timeline of about 90 days. They say that it'll take for you. Well, we did get our denial letters within 90 days. But as you can see through our timeline, it took well over 90 days before we actually received the approval and our cards. It actually took 4.5 months for my second son and 5 months for my first son. This doesn't include the whole process of me doing Social Security interviews and applications and doing the other Medicaid filings that I tried to do and got denied, and then finally figured out the Katie Beckett. So this whole process started in December, but it took 4.5 to 5 months from when I mailed the packets to receiving their cards. But with these denials, I learned a lot through the process, and hopefully this experience will help others since I'm sharing it. One of the things I wanted to share that I didn't really expect through this whole process was the emotional drain that it had on me. Because you figure it's just an application. I fill out applications all the time for my kids. I'm always filling out an application for a referral or for a specialist or something. I feel like I've done that so much in this past year trying to get services for my kids. So it really shouldn't be a big deal. It's just another application. But the weight of this application and what it means for our family was huge, because they were basically determining whether I could provide care for my kids. And I had a really hard time mentally being able to digest that maybe I won't be able to provide these services for my kids, even though I know that they need them. So needless to say, this did add an extra stressor for me during this time. So have you had to deal with the Katie Beckett process, or are you contemplating going through it? What has been the hardest thing that you've had to do so far while advocating for your kids? I'd love to read your story in the comments below. And so that's all I have for you for today. Please like and subscribe below, and I'll talk to you next time. Thanks. Bye.